Welcome to the Due Diligence Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Kraft, and for more than 10 years with SNN, I've been doing interviews with MicroCap management teams at investor conferences globally as well as online. Our SNN Live CEO video interviews are meant to pique interest, and then one can discover more by going to that company website. But personally, I always have more questions I want to ask. On this show, I'll be chatting with public company executives from microcap companies, and we'll dive deeper into companies that are rarely profiled. Microcap traditionally is overlooked, unloved, and absolutely never featured on legacy financial media outlets unless something material is going on. That's a good story. With my experience interviewing management teams, having interviewed most of them before, I've built up a network of companies, so there will be no shortage of content. Furthermore, this is an opportunity for me to showcase some of the qualitative lessons I've learned from guests on the Planet Microcap podcast. You can expect high-quality interviews with management teams that may have exposure to broader macro trends that you may never have thought of. One of the many reasons why I love the microcap space. So if you love microcaps and especially love learning about companies before the professionals do, let's start our due diligence. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not provided as financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or an offer to buy or sell any securities or make any investment. The views expressed by guest speakers are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement thereof by SNN or its affiliates. SNN expressly disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information presented in this podcast. My guest on the show today is Dave Schwerin, President, CEO, and Director of QuoteMedia Inc. It's a publicly traded company. The symbol is QMCI on the OTCQB. QuoteMedia is a leading software developer and cloud-based syndicator of financial market information and streaming financial data solutions to media, corporations, online brokerages, and financial services companies. The company licenses interactive stock research tools such as streaming real-time quotes, market research, news, charting, option chains, filings, corporate financials, insider reports, market indices, portfolio management systems, and data feeds. Their client list includes companies such as NASDAQ, the TMX Group, CSE, London Stock Exchange, the Motley Fool, Canaccord Genuity, and, well, us here at Planet Microcap. If you've visited any of our websites over the years and follow our newly launched index, all of that is powered by QuoteMedia. Suffice it to say, I've known QuoteMedia, their CEO, Dave Schwerin, the team at QuoteMedia, shout out to John and David, for a very long time. Over the last couple of years, the company has done a few conferences and started to publicly announce new customer wins, but for the most part, they've stayed relatively under the radar. That's why I wanted to chat with Dave on the show today to learn more about QuoteMedia as a company, as well as how the company is trying to disrupt financial market information and streaming financial data solutions industry, competing with large, well-established companies like Bloomberg, Thomson Reuters, Factset, and more. Moving into primary source data collection rather than getting it from other aggregation services, and capital allocation and growing the empire versus the prospect of being acquired. With that, please enjoy my conversation with Dave Schwerin, President, CEO, and Director of QuoteMedia Inc. Welcome back to the due diligence stream here on the Planet Microcap podcast. I'm your host, Robert Kraft. You can follow me on Twitter at Bobby K. Kraft. That's BOBBYKKRAFT. And joining me today is a gentleman at the helm of a company that we have a long history here with at Planet Microcap. We've known them for years. We've used some of their products and services. I'll get into that a little bit later, as you'll probably hear with some of my questions. So with that, joining me is Dave Schwerin. He's the President, CEO, and Director of QuoteMedia Inc., publicly traded company. The symbol is QMCI on the OTCQB. Dave, good to see you, man. How you doing?
Hi, Bobby. Good. Thank you. Thanks for having me on and spreading the word about our company. That's great. Love it.
Well, look, I mean, I wouldn't exactly say we're spreading the word, but in essence, we happen to we do use QuoteMedia's products and services. For full disclosure, I'm not a shareholder, but you know, our index, the MicroCap Review Index, is powered by QuoteMedia, as well as some of our data that we show on our website as well.
That's
so,
right. Yep.
we've been working with you guys for, wow, I think almost since I've been in the business, probably like almost 10 years, dude. It's been a long time.
Wow. when we were little. That's great.
Yeah,
That's good. Yeah.
when we were both young tykes.
Yeah.
So it's good to get you on here to talk a little bit about the business itself, because I think folks probably, especially if you're in the microcap space and you go on one of these microcap websites, there's a good chance that they're probably using QuoteMedia tools or QMod tools to show all the relevant market data. So I wanted to dig more into the business for folks to understand a little bit better about QuoteMedia as the public company. So before we get into all those deeper questions and everything like that, as I start off on each episode here, what would you say the company does in that one sentence?
One sentence. We bring in market data, aggregate all the research and information from all the exchanges and different providers, and then normalize it and provide it back to companies and individuals that need that information. That's one sentence. So, I can elaborate, but I think, it's really about, if you take a look at anything that we use, whether it's a bank or a brokerage firm or a portal or any website, any application where you're researching stocks, you're looking at your stocks, you're looking at all your information, your news, your filings, the real-time quotes, all of that stuff, that all has to come from a company. So it's not like a bank will go to every exchange and grab all the data and go to the filings and get all their data like that. They go to a company like us that does all of that for them, and that's what QuoteMedia is all about.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember back in the day when we were looking to get data on our website, stocknews.com, our old website.
Yeah,
I remember running into that issue and just being like, where can I get it so that's all in one place, as opposed to having each individual thing?
And somebody's got to do it, because it's a lot of work. Nothing's really normalized, nothing's the same, and to make all the charts and make all the research all the insiders and the filings and everything, you have to merge it all together and link it all together. So that's what we do. And then and then, as we then provide products for companies, whether it's the raw information or whether it's we call it QMod, which is our web tools and HTML5 kind of applications that people use, or our QuoteStream application, which is a desktop, a terminal, and we've got our web version of QuoteStream, which is really taking off as well. So all those kind of things.
Absolutely. I had one more thing that came up in my memory, and hearing your description is just like, also not realizing how expensive it can be going to each one of the exchanges and having to do all that. It's a pain in the neck.
Expensive, yeah, and time, and just the amount of data. Our servers are massive. We have 3 data centers that run all of this stuff, and it's just it's so big. People don't realize how big it has to be to have everything and have it all redundant, and it's quite a process.
Yep. All right. So take us back, because the company had been around even before me and you knew each other. So, can you give us an overview and history of the company, and what would you say was the original problem that QuoteMedia was looking to solve at the time?
Well, the original thing was to, back in around the 2000 mark, was trying to bring in information and then get it to companies and finding out what the companies were needing. So at that point, I actually got on the road and I traveled to a lot of cities and I talked to a lot of firms. There were some really big providers in the space, right? And we all know them, like Bloomberg and Refinitiv, which was Thomson Reuters at the time, and these big guys. And so there was I thought that there was lots of room for somebody to come in and be the next provider, right? Be the next service provider and be newer, be more modern, maybe do things more cost effective, be smarter about it. So a lot of the stuff that we saw was very old, very antiquated systems. I still laugh at some products that I say they look like they're from the 80s, right? Because they just do. They're just old, and people still use stuff like that. But it's so essentially I met with a lot of different firms, whether it was banks or brokerage firms, and I just kind of asked what their pain points were, right? I said, who's your provider? What are you getting? Sometimes they had a bunch of providers. And it was a very common thing where it was like, no, we're not happy. We spend way too much. They don't listen to us. When we want something, they don't call us back. They don't listen. They're not evolving. They're not changing. They're not modernizing. All of these things. And so I came back kind of from all these trips and said, okay, I think that there is a lot of room here. And I'd been in the tech space before, more, with the hosting side of things and building software for webmasters, web designers, and things like that. So I knew how to reach an audience in technology and on the web. And so it was a matter of just building that out and creating what the clients were looking for. The clients told us, right? It was a very straightforward. Like we hate all of the charts on our site. We need new charts. So, put in a team building charts, building historical data, putting all these things together. And it took a long, long time. And it took a long time to gain the name and the brand and the trust from the bigger and bigger firms as you went forward, right? So you can't just start a Fred's Market Data company and expect to close a JP Morgan Chase. It's just not going to work. So you have to climb your way up, getting smaller companies and getting your name out there. And then when we closed, a bank or an exchange, then all of a sudden it kind of catapulted us forward. And now you can see also on a lot of big sites and a lot of big banks and brokerage firms and portals, and we're all over the place now.
For sure. I mean, when we started working with you, I think your biggest client at the time was probably TMX. I think.
Maybe.
Yeah, like around 2000, in that like 2013, 14 timeframe, right?
Sure. Yeah. And that was a great one for us, right? Because the Toronto Stock Exchange really needed somebody to kind of help because they had gone through the big providers and were very tired with the lack of success and what they wanted to do. And so when we won that contract, that was amazing. It was very cool. We were small still, fairly small at the time. We're now over 100 people, and I think we've got another 50 contractors. So, call it 150 kind of people doing what we do now. But back then it was much, much smaller. And I remember the senior vice president saying to me, Dave, are you sure QuoteMedia can do this? Like, we want to go with you now, but are you sure you're big enough? And I said, yeah, no, we are. We can do all of this. And they've been our client for ever since.
Absolutely. I mean, let's dig into that a little bit, because that clearly was an inflection point in the company, big name brand now using QuoteMedia services and products, but I mean, you're competing with the Bloombergs, the Factsets, as you said, Thomson Reuters now as well. Talk to me about what that, and it's a long process to really break through, because the TAM is clearly huge, right? When we're talking about providing all data on not just for news websites like us, but being that mini Bloomberg and replacing those services for these different fund managers and stuff like that. Describe to me the pain points it's been like to break through and kind of break the chain, of folks using some of these legacy businesses, legacy media products and services.
Yeah, well, it's there's a lot of pain points as you go through, right? Because you're right, you're dealing with multi-billion-dollar companies, and there's really only a handful, and then it just drops down to a smaller company like ours, and then there's other small companies trying to do kind of little things here and there, but we're really that comprehensive one. We're really that hub that is doing everything for these big firms, and that's why we're growing and closing a lot of these big deals now. But the pain points are obviously sitting down and meeting with a firm like this, and having them say, okay, but you guys are very small, and you don't have a lot of clients, and are you sure you could do this? And then eventually they're not going to take the risk to go with a small firm or a new firm because their job's on the line. And so you end up losing that deal because they renew with their other provider, or they go another 2 or 3 years or whatever. And that's really a pain, because you need, in order to grow, in order to get moving, you got to close and you have to have more clients. And so it's like the chicken or the egg, we'll be better if we're bigger, that kind of thing. but over time, you just have patience, and then the other thing is just the checklist. When a big firm comes to you, the amount of data that they need and what they need and all the specific points. I often said, my goal is to get one of those sheets and check off we have it all. And fortunately now we do, and that's why we're getting good deals. But that takes a long time. People need this and they need that. They want the corporate actions, they want the filings, they want Canadian filings, the US filings, they want, fundamentals, they want all these things. So now we bring in all of this stuff. We collect a lot of it ourselves. We're now growing really big as far as our own data. Everything's our own now. We don't use a lot of third parties anymore. In the early days, we did. You kind of start by using partners, but all you end up doing is growing your partners and making them bigger. But now we do a lot of it ourselves.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you that because in doing some of my research for a call today, I think I saw from your Q2 2019 call how QuoteMedia, I think you said on that call that you're moving into being primary source data collection rather than getting it from aggregation services. I think that's a big turning point in the company's history.
Yeah, but you have to be big enough to do it that way, right? So when you're small and you only have 20 people, you can't do everything. So you need news. You go to a news aggregator. You partner with them. You bring in all the news feeds from an aggregator and you work with them. And you make them more money every time you sell their news. And then 5 years later, you get bigger and you say, okay, you know what? Now we don't need to be using a third party for news because all the pain points of a third party is they won't do what you want. Their price keeps going up. They have outages and problems and you can't work with them, and on and on and on. So third parties become a nightmare. And so I just basically said, okay, it's time for us to do news ourselves. We're not going to use a third party. Go to every single news provider and pull in all the feeds.
Was that from, because I remember, I don't know if you could talk, but just getting in the weeds a little bit, but I guess that was is that basically when you stopped working with news techs and then just said, okay, we're going to bring it all ourselves?
Yeah, like Newstex was one provider. We actually dealt with a bunch, right? There's quite a few. And so we would bring in a bunch of different ones that covered all these different areas. Mm-hmm. And, and then it was, now we just go direct. So everything is direct, Business Wire, PR Newswire, Dow Jones, Fly on the Wall, all those news feeds come direct from them to us. We normalize it, we bring it in, and we provide it back to users and firms as they want it. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And that's just news. Multiply that across every bit of research in the world of the markets, and holy, it's big.
I was going to say, from a business perspective, do all the big shops know who you are at this point? They must, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're closing quite a few of their deals and taking their customers, and there's no doubt that we're known in the industry now. 10 years ago, maybe not. We were a mosquito, right? Now we're not the mosquito anymore.
And it's because they saw the news that that you are providing services on our stuff, of course. That's clearly, right?
Yeah. You took us to fame.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure that's clear. And the reason I ask that is because, and I'm sure you do this, but do any of those potential customers come back to like, hey, let's do a pilot program? Because it seems kind of weird that it would always be like an all or nothing proposition. Like, why don't we work on some little thing first?
Yep.
Works.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, it's very common to do that too. Yep. Or different divisions of a company. Like, when we closed the Toronto Stock Exchange, the first thing we closed was just the data for their website so that they could run all the data for their site. And then the next thing the issuers needed a terminal for all the listed companies on the Toronto Stock Exchange so they could look at their real-time data, their level 2, their ownership data. Then the next thing, they needed IR solutions. Every company in Canada needed investor relations charts and filings and news and everything for their websites. So partnership with the Toronto Stock Exchange to do all of that for all of the Canadian companies. So that's just one client, but you can see how it grows and we do a lot. And every company's like that. They come in and one company might need just a data feed on, US equities for this one division. Then the next thing you know, we close that, and then they need terminals for another division, and then they need this, and then next thing you know, you're growing, and it's also when are their contracts, winding up? When is it time to review your contract? And that's when it's nice to be in the door with a company, working with a company, and then when those contracts come up, we're already a vendor, an approved vendor, I guess, for them. They don't have to do a lot of due diligence. They can just sign a deal. Yeah.
Gotcha. So if you were to compare yourselves to the Bloombergs, the Thomson Reuters, Factset, Aggregate, is it apples to apples in terms of the range of products and services that you both provide? Or are there a couple things maybe that they do, or a couple things that you do that the other doesn't?
Yeah. No, it's nobody's exactly the same, right? In lots of different areas, but there's specialty areas that companies go down. We're doing a lot of analytics now. We're doing a lot of data on data of all the data that we bring in. We're doing a lot of data collection ourselves for all the fundamentals and research information, going direct to every single place to get all of that information. And other companies are not doing that. They're just maybe using an aggregator or whatever. You gotta have focus, but you don't obviously go down all the same focus areas. And we kind of follow our clients, right? So what do our clients need? And when people are bringing up all of this interesting stuff, we're doing now company reports, fund reports, ETF reports, all kinds of things like that. They really want a lot of that information. So that's rolling out. There's always stuff rolling out, and then evolving the web products, right? So like our QuoteStream web trading application is amazing. It's all through the browser. It's all web based, and so you don't have to have a terminal. You don't have to download software and stuff like that. And so a lot of the banks and brokerage firms are going with that product because it's perfect for their traders, right? Their retail audience.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I mentioned the TAM earlier, total addressable market for QuoteMedia. I figured we should take a quick step back. And in your opinion, what is that number? What does that look like?
Oh, that's a tough one, right? Because as you go global, it gets massive and more massive. Billions and billions of dollars, obviously. Our primary focus was obviously North America to start with, and then growing into Europe, and now we're looking to expand into other countries as well. We already bring in a lot of data for other countries, but to have everything for every country is very difficult. That's a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of money. So to be global, that's pretty tough. You have to be multi-billion size, right? So yeah, we're constantly going after what the clients want and what exchanges they need and what data sets they're looking for, and growing that way. The market it's too big to even say. I mean, we're literally 0.001% of the market. That's really what's out there. So Absolutely. The growth potential is huge, and the size of deals are huge, right? Like we have little deals where people just need some basic stuff, and then all of a sudden we get multi-million-dollar deals. And if you get a lot of multi-millions, well, all of a sudden your company just becomes way bigger. And so we've closed a bunch of those this year, and it's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, we mentioned TAM, it's 0.001% market penetration, it sounds like at this point. Yeah. How do what's some of the company's strategies in winning away that business from the big guys? Because as we said, we've known each other for a long time. You've made some announcements on this front, talking about, market data provider, but just in the last 6 months with the market data provider for Motley Fool, partnering with the Street, the major agreement with the Schedule I Canadian bank. So, I mean, what's the company's strategy to continue to win business away from these guys?
Well, I think it's just doing more of what we do. And, the reason that we got, one of the largest banks in Canada, actually two of the largest banks in Canada now, and we're talking to two more, is because we have all the coverage of information that they're needing, right? So basically we check off all the boxes. We have all the products that they're looking for. They're actually very good products, very modern products, very new products. And cost. We can do things for very good costs, very, very, nice costs for the clients. And I think that's a big one for a lot of companies. They're on old contracts and they don't realize how much they're spending. And it's just, it's just grown through the years, and they're paying, these big monster companies, too much, right? Like I think there was one company that came to us, and it was their spend was $8 million with one of these big companies for not so much stuff. And $8 million a year was ridiculous. That was just a stupid number, and probably we could do it for half that, right? So, it's just save 50%, come to QuoteMedia. That's a big deal, right?
100%. I mean, is one of the pain points like the idea of, look, we've been using a Bloomberg or one of these for so long. What's our cost now of converting? I mean, that our entire infrastructure now to quote, because once they do that for you guys, it's great, right? Like, all right, now we're in there. But I mean, I'm sure that comes up quite often.
Oh yeah, no, the conversion is often tough. They, that's a pain point for them, right? But at the same time, there's a reason for it. So, they want to change. It's time to change. It's time to go with a company that's actually moving. We're a software as a service company. So we're, once you get one of our products are actually evolving. It's getting better over time. When the newer version comes out, you get the newer version, things like that, right? It's, and also it's time for them to change anyways. So they're probably going to go through a change. They're running some old data system that's not very secure. Like, things change over years, and you have to rebuild your back end. You have to rebuild how you're doing things. You have to modernize your trading systems, right? You can't just let it all sit there. So it's time to make changes. Are we staying with, that company, or is it time to look around? And that's usually where we're getting calls is we're making changes, and QuoteMedia, you're on the list. Let's talk. And the next thing you know, we're at the table doing that. But
all right, I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know if you can answer it, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
What's
the hardest data set to aggregate internally without having to go to an aggregator or anything? What's really difficult to get your hands on?
Well, that we are aggregating or that we're not.
I'll
tell you.
That's a nice spin. It's
very generic. It's very generic. But I'll tell you that the toughest data sets are always the data sets that you have to have humans to human intervention. Okay. A lot of human intervention. So, for example, you can do some data off of the XBRL filings, the SEC filings, and you can automate some stuff with computer programs, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there are a lot of humans involved because we've done all of that, and we found that there's a lot of extra that has to be done. But for, say, Canadian filings, which are on a PDF, good luck, right?
Or the ASX ones too.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, exactly. So if you're doing any kind of collection of information that you're trying to put it all together, and you have to have humans doing it, you need a team of people. They're going through documents, and then you have to have QA systems, et cetera, et cetera. So anyways, I don't know if your audience is all that excited about data collection, because it's not the greatest thing, to talk about. But that's the pain stuff, is the stuff that's not easy, right? I mean, getting a feed from an exchange and, here's the last change and, the last trade. Okay, you can have an automation of all of that. But there's a lot of stuff that's not automated. And then the other thing that's kind of hilarious is there is no normal, system in the world that normalizes all this and puts it all together. So you'll go to get the data for the filings, and you try to link it with a company, and it's not related. There's no tickerization. There's no numbering system. Everything's just a mess all over the world, right? Even news providers, and news, right? It's up to the news provider to tell us what company it is, which exchange they're on, all of that information. If they get that wrong, it all goes in the wrong place. So
the one we get the most is, and this happens a lot in MicroCaps because there's just name changes and management changes all the time. So that's always our pain point, is like, when we get from the companies like, oh, we have new this, and it's and I have to tell them like, look, we'll make sure to send it to our provider to change, but it's usually, it's.
Oh yeah, changes happen, and it takes a while to go across the industry, right? It's it's the way it is, right?
Yeah. So one of the products I want to ask about, because I always found this one really fascinating, and the potential growth of it is the B2C service of QuoteStream. And tell us a little bit about how that's evolved over the years. And does the company putting more marketing dollars into that so that it can sell just from its own services, or do you care more about it being sold from some of your white label partners and some of these bigger
so QuoteStream is a your end user application terminal type of thing to look at market data, right? To watch your portfolio, to look at level 2 data, news filings, all that. All of our research is kind of in one place for an end user, and so people know that. And then we've got our mobile applications and things like that, and everything all works together. But so then we have our B2C, which is you can just go buy it. You can go to quotestream.com and you can sign up and pay $50 a month or whatever it is, and get access to all of this. Or you can, and that's one model. And then the other model is our corporate level, which is our B2B model, right? Which is really, that's our focus as a company. Like going and getting more end users, we run some ads and we do different things, and that's word of mouth, and we made a place where an individual can just go buy it. But that's not our biggest focus. Our biggest, because you have to realize, as soon as I walk into a bank, they need 3,000 terminals, right? So it's like an instant 3,000 deal, where this is like trying to sell one-offs. So your question was, is the B2C something that we really focus on? Not so much, a little bit. It's not like it's a bad thing. It makes good money. But the B2B is our model. It's really just working with firms and trying to provide thousands of terminals all at once.
Very good. So then, Dave, this is a question I ask everybody on here, and you've done the circuit a little bit. You've gone to the conferences, you've done some of the one-on-ones, met with investors, institutions, the whole bit. What do investors still get confused about QuoteMedia?
Well, investors, I don't know. I guess they kind of don't quite get what we're doing. Like, market data is not an easy one. So it's just, you kind of get it, but then, getting all the nuances of it, and it's just a tougher business to understand. And I guess sometimes investors want to know, how come we're not growing as fast as, we could? And, we're a 20% growth rate, which is really good. I'm happy with it. But at the same time, we could balloon. It depends on what deals come in. Like a big deal could come along and make it go way faster. And that's always what we hope. But I guess investors also don't know, like at the beginning, how much time it takes to grow your name and your brand and get trust in the industry, right? It's just, it takes time, and you're not just going to rocket. You got to build, you got to do your due diligence all the way through. And then you become powerful, and then you become well known, and it's great at that point.
I mean, and when they say that, why aren't you growing faster? I mean, does it speak to just kind of the long sales cycle? It is because it's both inbound and outbound sales, right? It's not like you guys aren't going out there and talking to some of these folks.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, it can be a very long sales cycle, and the bigger the deal, it can take a year, right? You can be going through it in a year. There's data analysis. They're looking at the feeds. They're looking at the products. They're looking at penetration tests. They're looking at security, all kinds of evaluations. The bigger the firm, the more we have to do. Now we've got all of that. We've done all of that, so it's not a big deal. But if they went to a smaller firm and had to do all of that, there's no way. There's no way, right? They don't have SOC 2 compliance, and they don't have all the security sign-offs and everything that we've got, from third parties and stuff like that. So you have to be a certain size in order to succeed in this industry. And we've hit that point, which is great. But it takes a long time.
Yeah.
And it's even tougher now. The world is way tougher.
Let's go there. Why?
Just because of security standards. The compliance stuff has gone through the roof. Now we've got this ADOA compliance with it, which is for visually impaired people, all kinds of things like that. Like way back in the day, you just threw stuff on the web and, whatever. If it was white on black and black on white, who cares, right? But now it's like, no, it's got to be compliant and it's got to cater to all audiences. And we have to think about all users and when you're using it on your phone, it has to have text to speech and all these things, right? It's just difficult. And security, right? So we get security questionnaires that are 300 questions from a big firm that says, in order to go with QuoteMedia, we need you to fill all this out. We need to go through every single thing to make sure your security is good and all that. And you know what? 10 years ago, I never saw any of that. Nothing.
So, but let me ask you this. I mean, when you get that question, it's like, okay, why don't you grow fast? Like, I'm sure in the back of your head, you have like, all right, well, this is our plan to grow faster.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little
bit? We've grown based off of off of what we've made revenue, right? So we've basically I've grown the company. As we make money, we spend it. As we make money, we spend it. That type of thing. And so I'm growing it on that model, and like next year, it looks like we're going to have a lot more cash again. So I've got, the next plan. What are we going to do with it? I don't want to bank it. I want to grow the company. So where are we going to expand? Are we going to go into other countries? Are we going to do, what are we going to do? So, I'm just, just always focusing on this growth and what's next. That's just how I've done things. And yeah, people say, well, why don't you just go raise millions of dollars? Well, then you just kind of ruin the share structure of the company and the value of the company, all these things. It's just not right. It's just not right for where we're at in our, the valuation that we're at and that type of thing. It's just not the right time to do that. So we're actually doing very well and growing as far as revenue. So that's where I'm using the money to grow the company.
Gotcha. And I remember actually seeing somewhere where, I don't know if it was you that said this, or maybe it was a comment that somebody mentioned about how the fact that you can report positive EBITDA, that can potentially help when you're talking to some of your potential customers, because like, okay, they may be small, but they ain't losing money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They care about that, but they not necessarily. Obviously, if you're burning like crazy and your forecast is that you're going to run out of money in 2 years, that would be a bad thing, right? But yeah, they don't like a lot of debt. We have no debt, things like that. It's you do have to have a good balance sheet where they're confident, but with a good balance sheet, which is what we have, as well as the client list that we have and the testimonials that we have from our clients and big firms, is really good. And you take that to the table, and then we're at the table with the big boys, right? So it's not many at the table when you're doing big deals.
For sure. All right. Well, I want to play devil's advocate here. I know we talked about pain points a little bit, but in your opinion, what would you say are some of the company's downside risks that could limit some of the growth that you foresee?
I don't know. I don't think there's too many downside risks. Yeah, it's things are going really well. I guess that's why I don't know how to answer the question, because we've got our biggest year ever, our biggest growth ever, our biggest clients and deals ever, and more at the table. So I guess if we didn't close those, the new ones that are coming along, that would suck. But we're doing so well. We're now very, very busy because of the deals that we've signed. So we're working very hard to cater to those clients, because they have to convert. They have to change off of sometimes several providers, and we're providing everything. We're taking over, a lot of stuff for them. So my team is busy. And I think that's the hardest thing is once we get super busy like this, how do you deal with the next one and the next one and the next one? So I got to make sure that we don't fall apart if that happens.
Yeah. That was the one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Well, the two is execution risk. Probably the main one is just closing those deals. And then as you bring on some of these newer, bigger clients, I mean, you got to make sure you have the people.
Yeah. You have to have the people and you have to have the structure, but you learn a lot as you do this. And it's not like we're new at this. So we've got pretty good teams. Well, we got very good teams, but we've got good structure of these teams as well in order to do it well. And, but I just constantly listening to my staff, where are we short? Where are we needing? What are we needing to make it life easier? And, it's a never ending goal, right? Because the bigger you get, the more I just look at some companies that have thousands and thousands of employees, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's got to be fun to run. Figure that one out, eh?
Oh, for sure. So okay, so I'm gonna ask you a fun question then. Because you have to ask both sides, of course.
Sure.
But where do you, in your opinion, where do you see the company in 3 to 5 years, and what would you say are the inflection points that will get you to where you want to be?
Well, I mean, I think just going on looking at what we're doing in 3 to 5 years, we're going to probably have quite a bit more expansion into the international space, right? There's probably going to be some acquisition stuff that we're going to look at doing, so to bring in some of the smaller firms that are around us, and we can. I guess I look at a lot of the small guys that are trying a few things here and there, and their spend is crazy, and I have all the information, so I could turn those companies into 100% profit by just acquiring them. And so I think probably I'm going to do some of that in the next 3 to 5. Probably one of our discussions is to move on to probably the NASDAQ as we get bigger. That's on the radar as well. And then, so just more data sets, more international stuff. And then obviously, then we can close a lot more global deals with these bigger firms that need more global stuff.
I mean, on the capital allocation side of things, you just said something there. I mean, what would you say is the biggest deal you've closed to this point? And what would you say is the deal, if you closed it, that would take you above the hump where you can start to now look at some of these pocket acquisitions that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, deals, range. We say, a bigger deal might be $500,000 a year up to several million a year, right? Say 2 or 3 million a year. And so those are the types of deals that are, amazing to get, right? We get lots of deals that are 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 a year kind of thing, because somebody needs some basic data for this or that or whatever. But when you're powering a big bank or a big brokerage firm, or even a big web portal, and not even a portal that's like a single portal, but an international portal where there's the Canadian or the English version, the Canadian, the US version, the Italian version, the French version, all of those things, right? So you can see how some of these firms are quite big. But we're if we can get a lot of those deals going and close those big ones, that projects us into whatever we want to do at that point, because you're talking about millions and millions a year of change of revenue, right? And it's not like we need to balloon into thousands and thousands of people. I mean, obviously you want to have good redundancy and good staff, but you want to also automate. And we've really tried to automate as much as possible through our systems. So computers are doing a lot of the work, right? And then you got a lot of money that you can keep growing, and there's lots of room. It's never ending. Certainly never ending. Yeah.
I got a silly question. Or it might not be silly. I don't know. I'm sure you get this comment all the time from potential investor or shareholder or whoever, because you have to think to yourself, I mean, look, QuoteMedia has now been around for 10 plus years. They're kicking away. They're chipping away at some of some of the bigger competition's customer base. Why hasn't one of them just swooped in, sooner rather than later? Okay, so what? They pay a little bit of a premium. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. What's the big deal? To stop this potential upstart from potentially swallowing them at some point.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. Every once in a while that happens, right? There's two sides of what happens is a company comes to acquire us for a reason because they want to go into the space or they want to be part of the space. And QuoteMedia is the perfect kind of central hub of this. And then the other side of it is a company that wants to acquire us that is in the space. And so we haven't got to the point of that level. We had one of them come to acquire us because they liked our technology and our stuff, but we were growing and I didn't want to sell them our technology and stuff like that. I wanted to keep growing it. But we haven't had one come to us because we're taking their clients yet. I know they're mad. I've had conversations with them and they're very mad, but nobody's come along to do that yet. The question is, will it happen? It could. Of course it could. I mean, these things happen all the time. And if that happens, it will go to shareholders as a vote and all this stuff, right? Do you want to be part of that big firm or not? So we'll see what happens. It could happen, right? I think better than that is a company that's big, because we're not that big, right? So there's multi-billion-dollar companies. Somebody will want to be a Bloomberg, right? And if you want to be a Bloomberg and you're not really in that space so much, then why wouldn't you the first acquisition you should make is QuoteMedia, right? And then you can tack on any others if you got enough money, if you're big, and you turn it into a 100 million in revenue to a 200 million in revenue kind of company, and now you're really competing. You're growing and going that way. So I would say that that's another model that could happen.
So how much, if at all, have shareholders of QuoteMedia or folks maybe looking at QuoteMedia to invest in, how much have any of those folks influenced your decision-making process at all?
Not with regards to the company and the data. It's the clients, right? The clients tell us where we need to go and where our revenue needs to come from. The shareholders, they're not deep in it like we are. So I would say no, there's not a lot of shareholder influence as far as that goes.
Very good. All right. Well, to close us out here today, public company CEO now for many years. How's the experience been for you up until this point? Has it gotten somewhat easier as the company has grown a little bit, or how's it been?
Yeah, no, it's been a great experience. I mean, I have no concerns. I mean, it's not easy at times, and sometimes you have to you get on the road and tell stories, tell as many people as you can about that. But at the very beginning, I think when I started, we were small and we were going on the road talking to people, and some people would just say, "What are you doing? Don't even go on the road. Build the company. That's really what it's all about." And I was like, "Yeah, that's because I'm more private company kind of guy." And I'm like, that makes sense. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And that's pretty much what I've done. I'm just focusing on the company, closing the deals. I do a lot of sales work myself. I do a lot of product kind of design and ideas, and I meet with a lot of clients about stuff. So there's just, I guess it's just one of those things. As a public company, I haven't gone crazy in the public side of things. You know what I mean? I've done some of it, and I get shareholders that call me in. I get to know them, and it's all great. I have no problem with it. But really, I'm focused on the business. I'm focused on the company, growth, clients, and that's my life, right? It's all about that.
Very good. All right. I think, Dave, we covered it all today, man. And so with that, where can our audience go and find more information on QuoteMedia?
Well, obviously, QuoteMedia.com. That's probably the place to go, QuoteMedia.com. And if anybody wants to know more about the the public side of the company, we have an IR guy that handles things, and it's Brendan Hopkins, and his email address is bhopkins@quotemedia.com. So that's another way. Or just go to our website and contact us through there.
Very good. Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. Good luck, stay safe, and hopefully we'll get together soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Bobby. Appreciate it.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not provided as financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or an offer to buy or sell any securities or make any investment. The views expressed by guest speakers are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement thereof by SNN or its affiliates. SNN expressly disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information presented in this podcast.